This show, I didn't realize it had been going on since 1993. It's like one of the longest running British crime dramas.
It's older than you, Jess.
I know.
It's my age, but it's older than you.
It's old.
It's so young.
It's you.
And it looks so good for its
you
age.
in TV years.
It looks so beautiful for its age, as I've been told before by 20-something-year-olds all the time.
Guys,
we're gonna get
Alice
comments
so
now that's
much.
like, actually, I thought you were older. Actually, you don't look that great. Sorry.
Have you ever wondered what it's like to perform an autopsy?
Ever wanted to know how accurate your favorite crime drama is?
If you're brave enough,
join us inside the morgue.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Inside the Morgue. We're your favorite pathology duo, Jess and Alice. That's Alice.
Hi, that's me. That's Jess.
We have, I think this is a new show. I don't think we've ever watched this one for the pod. It's called Silent Witness. We watched season 13, episode 3, called Voids, and this is part 1. So we didn't watch the part 2, but maybe we'll go back to it another time.
That's our MO, though. We've done that a few times where we've watched like part 1 of an episode, and then we just we abandon it.
Normally we watch the part 2, and we're like coming at it.
What happened? This is crazy. Yeah, this is our MO if you're new here. We just jump right in. This is the
beginning of everything.
Yeah, we just jump in the middle of shows and still enjoy them.
Yeah. So we're going to be getting into it. There's a lot of blood spatter analysis and lots of good autopsy scenes too.
Yes.
Which I was like almost not really like super surprised about, but I was pleasantly surprised that they were as good as I was hoping they would be.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into the true story that this is based on because it's very, very obvious what the true story is. I texted Jess 2 minutes into the episode. I texted Jess and I'm like, this is clearly based on this case. But the number of autopsy scenes, and the autopsy is such a crucial, important part of this story. And you get into doing second autopsies. It's a very interesting episode for sure.
Yeah, kept my attention the whole time.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Before we get into it, we are recording with Young Junk Studios. Terry, where can people find you if they want to start a podcast of their own?
Oh my God! If someone wants to start a podcast of their own, they can go to youngjunk.com and we'd be more than happy to get in touch.
Heck yeah, do it.
All right, let's get into it.
All right, so we open on a husband and wife being all happy in a park, walking around, joking around with the wife's sister and her significant other. They do hint at having some kind of financial trouble, but like saying that they're going to have to sell the house soon. And the husband's like, don't worry, we're going to take care of it. Cut to nighttime. And the husband is covered in blood calling 911, which is never a good sign. And he says that his wife has had an accident and he thinks she may have fallen down the stairs and he just has blood all over the front of his shirt. So scene response, obviously, by investigators happens. And so our 2 doctors show up, or 2 pathologists show up to the scene. And one of them notes there's a man and a woman. I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on their names. But the woman pathologist notes that the crime scene is, she quotes, in shambles, because they're British and it's cute. She says it's a shambles. She sees their dog wasn't set aside from the scene. The dog has blood on him. There's a cop that has blood on his shoe. He wasn't wearing shoe booties. Like everything is nothing secure. Everything is a mess. Anyway, they go over to the body and they note that the pupils are dilated. And then the man pathologist notes that he thinks this is too much blood for a stair fall. And he thinks some of it is a dried blood. She has blood on her face, bruised eyes, and there's blood across the wall, across all the stairs. However, the woman pathologist happened to contribute to a paper, a Danish paper, they keep saying, that had to do with trauma that is experienced in stair falls. And she's like, well, she could have fallen initially, gotten back up, slipped in her own blood and fallen again. That's not unheard of. And she had seen it in a case before. So she's referencing that. So the body is in a straight line. There's no abnormal angulation of the neck. There's multiple lacerations on the head and skull. Possible defensive wounds on the wrist is noted. These are all noted by the man pathologist. And one bloody hand half clenched in her lap. Dried blood is covering all of the soles on the soles of her feet, and these just the male pathologist does not think that this comes from a general staircase fall. He thinks this was some kind of violent confrontation and she was attacked. It could have been multiple falls, the female pathologist argues. The floor is warm from the house's heated floors, so the drying of the blood is not exactly indicative of an earlier or later death, because that will contribute to how the blood dries. So we will give a green flag for PPE, because after, and for them taking photos of the husband's clothing, and we'll say PPE after they get there. They put on their PPE, because there was definitely not a secure scene. Not everybody was wearing their PPE when they first got there.
Not the officers.
Not the officers. Green flag for our pathologists, who are the group that we're following right now. Green flag for them, and for them taking photos of the husband's clothing, because it's evidence. Everything. Why is he covered in her blood? What was he doing? All of these things need to be taken into account. So he claims he was trying to resuscitate her. And one investigator notices something weird about the pattern of blood on the floor, like someone had walked away from the body. He follows it, and the pattern takes him into the bathroom, and he sees that there is blood on the paper towel packaging. And on the wall with the blood, there's a weird pattern, like a circular type pattern, and almost like somebody tried to clean up and was like, circling. Yeah. I just always think wax on, wax off. But realized it wasn't going to work. So they spray luminol on the wall, which is, we'll give another green flag for luminol testing for the presence of, I guess, oxidation, not just blood, but particularly blood.
So the female pathologist, she calls herself a home office pathologist. I'm not sure what that means, or if that's a British term I've never heard of, but she was at the scene, and the husband had asked her if she would go notify his stepdaughter while she was at her work. She works as a nurse. So she went and does that, which might not exactly be her position to do it, but she does it anyway.
Yeah, she claims because she's off the clock.
She's off duty. There's no conflict of interest.
So she's saying there's no conflict of interest, but like,
I feel like there is.
People point that out later.
The husband is now at the station for questioning. He last saw his wife alive at 10 p.m. that night when she was gonna go to bed, and he stayed outside by the pool drinking. He tried to resuscitate her, then he called 911, and he says he sat by her and held her hand, but he says he never went to the utility room / bathroom. And the wife, he says, was on diazepam for stress and anxiety, and that she had been drinking that night, but not excessively. So now we cut to the autopsy scene where all of the fun stuff starts happening. And immediately I have to give a red flag, because why are their scrubs white? Who wears white scrubs?
I thought that too. And I'm like, well, maybe it's easier to see if they're dirty, and then like you can just bleach them. Like,
still, that's so weird. I've never seen a show portray pathologists to wear white.
Well, like sometimes I wear darker scrubs, like navy or gray.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I get something on my navy scrubs, I don't see it for a while. And then I'm like, oh shit.
That's true.
I have blood on me and I want to wash this immediately. So maybe the white scrubs, it's more obvious. And then like you can just bleach it and not worry about the color. Because I thought that too. I was like,
that's right.
I was like, that's really, it looked like they were in a cult. like just dressed in all white head to toe. But I'm like, maybe they're onto something.
They're in a mental institution.
Yeah, I was like, maybe that's like not a terrible idea. You can see what you get on you and immediately throw it in the wash and just bleach the hell out of it. Get
all right, I see your point of view.
I was thinking about this a lot because I also almost gave it a red flag, and I was like, I don't know. It's just like not what I normally do, but
it's like a half red flag.
Yeah. It's a pink flag.
The girl pathologist is called by the husband's lawyer, and they want her to perform a second autopsy. This is like before the first autopsy has even started.
Yeah,
they're like jumping the gun.
They're anticipating this. They're like, all right, wife is found dead.
It's gonna go to
husband
court.
Looks sus. We know where this is going. We're gonna need a second autopsy.
Yeah. So they recruit her, and when people do a second autopsy, like the second pathologist is allowed to see everything that the first pathologist has done in his report and like photographs and everything, but that first person can't know what the second person is writing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no like conflict. There's no opinions being changed.
Right. It's interesting when a second autopsy is requested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I definitely think this is a conflict of interest because she was at the scene, but that's why they wanted her. They wanted her at the scene, or they wanted her because she was at the scene, and not just because she was at the scene, and also because she has the background of doing research for the trauma due to stair falls. And so they thought
that's their whole thing. They're like, she wrote this paper. We want her.
She would be good to have on their side. Because she does end up meeting with them, but first she refuses. She does end up meeting with them, and she's like, I do have the numbers of like other excellent pathologists that you can call. And the husband's like, yeah, but they weren't there last night. You were at the scene. Like you know.
Yeah.
Oh no, Terry, I lost my screen. I can't see my slides.
Where are my slides?
Wow. Okay, I can see them now. I don't know why I went all the way to the end of the slide. Okay. So at the autopsy, they note that the body is of a well-nourished adult female appearing approximately 40 years of age, no decomposition changes noted, and the deceased is of good general condition. I also like that they're dictating in their little recorders.
Reminds me of one of the pathologists that we work with.
Yeah,
he has everything.
He dictates
he's
everything.
The cutest human being.
Yeah, he's the only one, the only doctor that I've ever worked with that still like dictates in a recorder. Yeah. But you see it all the time in these shows. Like just
which I feel like it's more efficient.
Yeah.
In some cases.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. When you're, especially when you're doing the external, I'm just thinking like if you're cutting and you think of something, you got to like, oh my God, take my gloves off. Okay. Found this.
Yeah.
But like, if you remember it and then just dictate it after, which is what our doctor does. Mm-hmm. So something to note is they shaved her whole head because she had so many lacerations underneath her hair and they really needed to get a good look at them. And the incisions they cut into her head literally across the top of her head. Wait, so they cut like the incision?
They cut like how my headphones are. Like that's where it looked like the incision was. Like when they were like reflecting the scalp.
Yes, because when you reflect the scalp, you definitely want to avoid any areas that there are trauma, like any gunshot wounds, any lacerations, just to preserve the evidence. So but like you also want to, if the body is going to be viewed by loved ones, you want to do it in a way where the funeral home is able to cover up any incisions that you make. So we usually do it like further on the back of the head, but that is, I'm wondering if like there were too many.
Yeah, because you don't want to cut through your evidence too. So maybe they were avoiding something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they'd already shaved her entire head, so maybe they had an idea of what they were doing for preparation, like maybe a wig.
They could put a wig on her,
or maybe she's direct cremation. So both frenula are torn. So your frenulums are frenula, sorry, plural. That little, I just want to show just my frenulum. So like up here, where like your lip attaches to your gum, and then you also have it under your tongue, where your tongue attaches to the bottom of your mouth. Fun fact about me, I had to get surgery on my frenulum when I was a kid. That's why I know what it is.
Wait, was your tongue tied?
No, it was my top one and my lip. I had a huge gap in my teeth, and it was caused because my frenulum was too long and it was between my teeth. So I had to get like teeth removed, and they had to like use a laser to cut my frenulum shorter so that my teeth could, because even if I had braces, it wouldn't like go back together because the frenulum was just in the way.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy? I was like 12. That's when I learned what a frenulum was.
She's been obsessed since.
And I have been waiting for the moment to talk about it on a podcast, to tell people that I have this pretty smile because I had to cut my frenulum. So yeah, both of them are torn, associated with laceration to the inner lips and loosening of the front teeth. Well, yeah, also, I'm guessing they're talking about the top and bottom lip frenulum, not the tongue, but that is another one. Further evidence of a blow to the face, according to the first autopsy. The rectangular bruising and linear laceration appear to be composed of possibly overlapping linear tears, which during the first autopsy, they interpret as being more than one impact to the front of the head. And the first guy interprets it as coming from one strike to the head, and the lacerations and bruising look really realistic here. But I think there would have been more redness around the general laceration. They did look a little pale.
Yeah, there was the whole musculature looked really pale.
Yeah, it looks very clean and neat. And I mean, we've talked about this a few times before. Like, the body, like, if it's not embalmed, super colorful. Super colorful inside, even in death. Like, lots of bright. That was like one of the first things when I saw my first autopsy that shocked me, is how colorful it all was. I was like, wow, this is not the muted tones that I see on TV. This is in your face bright reds and yellows. And yeah. So the second autopsy interprets it as a head striking on an uneven surface, like the edge of a step. And she has like a huge like laceration on the front of her face.
Yeah.
No, I lost my screen again. Terry, I lost my screen.
We're doing so good.
Oh, wait. Okay, it's back now. Okay. There is an absence of bilateral, periorbital hematomas and nasal fracture. And the first pathologist thinks this is from the combination of use of a weapon causing blunt force trauma. So bilateral, periorbital hematomas, basically bruising around the eyes, which you would get.
Like raccoon eyes.
Raccoon eyes is what we call them, because it's just black and blue under your eyes. And that can be caused by a few different things, not just like a strike straight to the face. Like, you'll see them also in sometimes gunshot wounds that go through and through, that just break a bunch of the bones in the face, like the very delicate bones in your face. You'll get like raccoon eyes from that. But with the combination of a nasal fracture, this first pathologist believes that it's due to a strike to the face. And the second pathologist believes that the nasal fracture is consistent with a fall, and no laceration or abrasions to the eyelids may be seen as in a direct blow to the eyes, but instead these have developed through the blood seeping through the soft tissues around the eye from the nasal fracture and forehead lacerations. And I just thought this whole scene was so interesting when you see, like, side by side how there are two very knowledgeable, trained professionals in their fields observing the same exact thing, but coming to very different conclusions.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's a very interesting thing about forensics in general, like especially autopsies.
Because everything is based on observation.
Exactly.
And everyone has a different opinion about how something happened.
Right. And like, certain people have their own biases, and like which is what they get into in this. But yeah, it was really interesting to see them side by side explaining the same exact injury, but coming to different conclusions about how these injuries may have occurred, which like they could both be right. Like, it's tough. Like, when we went to our training to be to get certified as medical legal death investigators, there was just like a practice that they gave us, a sheet of different examples of death or like deaths that occurred. And we were put into groups, and each group had to come up with like what they thought the manner of death was, either undetermined, natural, accident, suicide, homicide. And based on what the information was that you give it. And it was so interesting to like debate with other people in the class. Like, okay, no, I think this is an accident, because had it not been for this car crash that happened 3 years ago, they would not have sustained this injury, which would have not led to the death. And they're like, oh, well, I think it's natural because it was this kind of thing that caused. And it's just, it's up in the air sometimes. It's crazy.
It's really fun to like have those debates back and forth.
Yeah.
Because just like figuring out like how the other person's thinking compared to how you're thinking.
Right.
And like also each county works way differently. So like we, from like where we work, we're coming up with different conclusions based on what we see a lot. Versus other like more rural counties, they don't see this, so they might come up with a totally different opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Super fun.
Yeah, it's just interesting.
Anyway, back to our new favorite show, I think. So I also have to give a green flag because the organs that they showed were super realistic looking. And even the way that the pathologist was like cutting them with the grossing knife, like that's something that we just don't see all that often with these shows.
No, you really don't.
It looked really realistic and accurate.
Yeah.
So he is cutting the lung, and he says it shows no congestion, consolidation, or malignancy. So basically it's very normal lung. And I also have to give another green flag for them putting organs into a bag that will go back into the body cavity, because that's also something that like shows kind of just don't show at all.
Yeah.
And That's like the main question that I get a lot when new people are coming and observing autopsies. They're like, so what do you do with the organs? And I'm like, well, it's going to go back with the body.
Yeah.
That's what it does.
Yeah, we keep what we need in case we need further testing, and then it all goes back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just like, I like seeing things that other shows don't typically show.
Yeah, this was really interesting. And it kind of made me think, I know we've talked about Body of Proof having really like realistic looking organs before. But yeah, I was also impressed.
And so they say there's little blood in the lungs. There was evidence of bleeding in the nasal cavity as a result of a basal skull fracture. If she really was beaten and left unconscious at the bottom of the stairs, you would expect to see a lot more aspirated blood, or even like blood trickling down the unprotected airways.
Mhm.
But they don't see that here.
And that's what the second.
This is coming from the second pathologist. Yeah. So the first autopsy's cause of death, he rules it as blunt force trauma to the head. And then in like another paragraph there, he says it's attributed by an assault by a third party. And the second autopsy says all of the injuries can be accounted for through a fall down the stairs, possibly while intoxicated. We know that she was possibly drinking that night that it happened. But there is an absence of defensive wounds, and that argues against deliberate blunt force trauma. I also forgot to mention the autopsy dummy that they used when the second pathologist was like doing her little dictation. There was like an overall body shot of it, and it just didn't, it looked not as good as I was hoping it would have looked. It looked really fake, obviously, because it probably was fake.
I feel like that's so hard to get right. And the best body I've seen in any show or movie that during an autopsy scene was definitely Autopsy of Jane Doe. And that's because it was a real person. A real person. But like, obviously they weren't cutting into a real person. And even like some shots of that, we had some complaints about, because you didn't see a lot of the fat or musculature that you would see when you cut into a body. I feel like that just has to be so hard.
So hard as a special effects person trying to get it right.
Yeah, so hard as like
for
a
this one, like
effect.
she looked so pale, as we mentioned before. Like the musculature and the fat looked like dull and pale.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I wanted more. I wanted some color. More.
I want to see that lividity. I wanted to see that blood settling on the bottom of the body to see her positioning when she died. So
far, our red flag, green flag count, I think we're at 3 green flags and like a half red flag.
Yeah, half red flag for the white scrubs. I want to do more research. Hey, if you work in a morgue and you wear white scrubs and I was right about the reason, let me know, because I love being right.
I also just want to know like what color scrubs are you assigned to wear?
Yeah, we have scrubs provided to us from work that are either gray or navy. But before that, I was wearing my own scrubs. I would just wear whatever.
Yeah, I would wear anything that before they like bought us our own scrubs.
Yeah. And now I just wear the ones they give us because I just wash them at work. All right. So far it passes in our terms, but if you thought we missed anything, please let us know. And then we will be getting into...
We're almost done. We're almost
done.
Catching up with this episode.
Yeah. So they have a coroner's inquest. So a coroner's inquest is a fact-finding inquiry into the circumstances surrounding a death, particularly when the cause is unclear, violent, unnatural, the like. So inquests aim to determine who died, how and when, and where the death occurred. They are not designed to establish blame or legal liability. So yeah, the coroner isn't there to convict anybody of the crime. They're just there to establish how a person died, what manner it was. So they're there to gather information and provide details for the death certificate. So the purpose is to investigate and establish the facts surrounding the death, including the identity of the decedent, the cause of death, and the circumstances of the death. So who conducts an inquest? A coroner, a judicial or a government official who presides over the inquest. And it's not a trial. They're not trials. They don't determine guilt or innocence. It's just... Yeah.
This is also something that we learned when we were at training to become certified medical legal death investigators. And I was like, I've never heard of an inquest. I don't think in our county we've ever done an inquest. And if we did, it was probably back in like the 80s. But there was another county who was like explaining how they just did an inquest on whatever case it was. And I was like, that's so wild to think about.
And I think, I mean, if you're out there and I'm incorrect, please correct me. I much as I just said I love being right, I also love learning new things. So tell me if I'm wrong. I think, at least in our state, it is more common to see in more rural areas, like more like less populated areas, to do a coroner's inquest. But yeah, it seems like a very interesting process. I was definitely intrigued when we were learning about it in our training. So in the show, they do a 3D scan of the head to look at the overall images, and the first pathologist is trying to match a weapon for what caused the damage. So if you hit a blood source that hard with a heavy blunt object, you're gonna get spatter, kind of like stomping in a puddle. It's gonna spatter everywhere.
It's gonna go everywhere.
It's gonna go everywhere. You're gonna see it everywhere. So the husband has not spatter on his shirt. He has smeared blood on his shirt, is consistent with him hugging his wife. So there is no spatter. The husband reveals that his first wife died of a brain hemorrhage. And the second pathologist is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And this is like, so I already knew what this case was based, like what the show was based on. But as soon as he mentioned like, oh, my first wife, she died of a brain hemorrhage, I was like, this is very clearly taking from a real life thing that happened. And we're going to talk about it.
Of course we're going to talk about it.
The sister talks to the second pathologist, and she may be having doubts about the husband. The sister shows up to the scene because the pathologist is there to look at the blood pattern again. And the sister just walks in very devastated. And the sister says, so ominously, I just don't know how this could happen twice.
And then the pathologist is like, what do you mean? What do you mean it happened twice?
See, I mean, my first thought as a death investigator, if I'm helping out this guy whose wife died suspiciously, and he tells me his first wife died of a brain hemorrhage, I'm gonna be like, what caused it? Would it happen to be a fall?
Was this a natural brain hemorrhage?
Would it happen to have been, was it traumatic? Was the trauma stair related?
This reminds me of a report I took the other night. They told me, I was like going through it and I was like, oh, like, is there any like trauma or anything suspicious? And they're like, oh, well, they do have a hemorrhage in their head. And I was like, okay. And how did that happen?
Tell me more.
And they're like, oh, well, they fell down the stairs. And I was like, that's crazy. I had to bring her in.
Well, oh my God. So on the wall where there was blood spatter, there's also this kind of like tribal mask. And there wasn't much blood around it, only flecks. But they spray luminol to their surprise, and it glowed in the lower portion of it. But the second blood against the DNA samples collected from the family members, and they're a close match, but it's not an exact match. So they're thinking it must be the daughter was a close match to the DNA. So it has to be her mother's blood, the first wife, who fell down the stairs. Coincidence?
I think not.
I think not.
And if you've already picked up on the tree crime, props to you.
Yeah. It's the Michael Peterson trial.
Into it.
If you've ever seen I know Jess hasn't because Jess hates documentaries, we've learned. The staircase documentary? Dude.
Which I did try to watch and I couldn't.
You don't like documentaries. You try. And I applaud you for trying, but like maybe you don't. You don't enjoy them. Like maybe you'll find one that you like actually. But no, you have watched them. What was the Fox Hollow one that you liked?
Oh, that was cool because there were so many bodies, and they were like, "Well, we can't really find all of them." And I was like, "What do you mean?
What do you mean?"
That was like short though. Yeah, that was on Hulu. The Fox Hollow Murders.
Yeah, that one I do want to watch. But yeah, every time I'm like, "Dress, did you watch this true crime documentary?" She's like, "No." I'm like,
there was also like mannequins with that case, and I was like, "Wow, anything with mannequins like hooks me in."
That's interesting.
From a crime junkie.
It's an interesting tidbit about Jess, guys. She likes mannequins.
Oh, if you ever think it's mannequin, it's never just the mannequin.
Oh, yes. Okay, now I see what you see. Everybody always thinks it's a mannequin. You're right. Yes, crime junkie.
Crime junkie.
Crime junkie.
All right, let's get into the Peterson case. So on December 9th, 2001, Michael Peterson called emergency services on 911 to report that he had just found his wife, Kathleen Peterson, unconscious in their Forest Hills neighborhood in Durham, North Carolina, and suspected that she had fallen down, he says, quote, 15 to 20, I don't know, end quote, stairs. He later claimed that he had been outside by the pool and had come in around 2:40 a.m. to find Kathleen at the foot of the stairs. Peterson said she must have fallen down the stairs after consuming alcohol and Valium. Toxicology results showed that Kathleen's blood alcohol content was 0.07, and her alcohol in her urine was 0.11, and she had taken between 5 and 15 milligrams of Valium. The autopsy report concluded that the 48-year-old woman sustained a matrix of severe injuries, including a fracture to the superior cornum of the left thyroid cartilage and 7 lacerations to the top and back of her head, consistent with blows from a blunt object. And she had dried blood around, and she had died from blood loss 90 minutes to 2 hours after sustaining those injuries. Kathleen's daughter, Caitlin, and the sister, Candace, they both initially proclaimed Michael's innocence and publicly supported him alongside the children, but the sister reconsidered after learning of Michael's bisexuality, as did the daughter after reading her mother's autopsy report. Both subsequently broke off from the rest of the family. Although forensic expert Henry Lee, hired by Peterson's defense, testified that the blood spatter analysis was consistent with an accidental fall down the stairs, police investigators concluded that the injuries were inconsistent with such an accident. As Peterson was the only person at the residence at the time of Kathleen's death, he was the prime suspect and was soon charged with her murder, and he pleaded not guilty.
So the medical examiner, Deborah Radish, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. I'm so sorry. Concluded that Kathleen had died from lacerations to the scalp caused by a homicidal assault. According to Radish, the total of 7 lacerations on the top of her head were the result of repeated blows with a light yet rigid weapon. They didn't have the weapon right away. I remember this from the documentary, and I remember the search for it. Oh my God, it was crazy. The defense disputed this theory. According to their analysis, the lacerations were not consistent with the blows of any sort because there was a lack of underlying injury, such as skull fractures, bruising, swelling, or hemorrhaging of the brain, which is also why I think the prosecution was trying to say it was like a light, rigid weapon. It wasn't like a heavy, forceful object.
Like a hammer.
It was enough to like scrape the scalp and cause the bleeding, but they didn't think it was enough to cause all the underlying damage that defense was arguing that they lacked. The trial drew increasing media attention as details of Peterson's private life emerged. Hardin and his prosecution team, among them Mike Nefrong, attacked Peterson's credibility, focusing on his alleged misreporting of his military service and what they described as a gay life that he had kept secret. That, again, is the words of the article and the reporting, because I remember watching the documentary and I didn't like that he was getting like attacked for his sexuality. They bring it up because there was an alleged affair, which, like, that's fine. Just say there's an alleged affair. But, like, they were going after him for being bi. The prosecution contended that the Petersons' marriage was far from happy, suggesting that Kathleen had discovered Michael's alleged secret affair and wanted to end their marriage. It was the main motive that the prosecution offered at the trial for Kathleen's alleged murder, the other being a $1.5 million life insurance, $1.5 million, sorry, not just imaginary currency. I forgot to say dollar. Life insurance policy. According to Assistant District Attorney Frida Black, Kathleen, quote, would have been infuriated by learning that her husband, who she truly loved, was bisexual and having an extramarital relationship, not with another woman, but a man, which would have been humiliating and embarrassing to her. We believe that once she learned this information, that an argument ensued and a homicide occurred, end quote. Again, this is all quote.
The defense argued that Kathleen accepted Michael's bisexuality and that the marriage was a very happy one, a position supported by Michael and Kathleen's children and other friends and associates. The prosecution said that Kathleen's murder was most likely committed with a custom-made fireplace poker called a blow poke. It had been a gift to the Petersons from Kathleen's sister, but was missing from the house at the time of the investigation. Later in the trial, the defense team produced the missing blowpoke, which they said that they found in the garage. A juror contacted after the trial noted that the jury had dismissed the idea of the blowpoke as the murder weapon.
So Elizabeth Ratliff was a friend of the Petersons, and she had died in Germany in 1985. And she had also been found dead at the foot of a staircase with injuries to her head. Her death had been investigated by both German police and U.S. military police. An autopsy at the time of her death concluded Ratliff died from intracerebral hemorrhage secondary to the blood coagulation disorder von Willebrand's disease, based on the blood in her cerebral spinal fluid, and reports that she had been suffering severe, persistent headaches in the weeks leading up to her death. The coroner determined that the hemorrhage resulted in her immediate death, followed by Ratliff falling down the stairs and collapsing. So they didn't think that. So, like, they think the hemorrhage in her head caused her death, and then she fell down the stairs.
Mm-hmm. She collapsed, yeah.
She collapsed. The Petersons had dinner with Ratliff and her daughters, and Michael Peterson had stayed late and helped Ratliff put the children to bed before going home. The children's nanny, Barbara, discovered the body when she arrived the next morning. So Peterson was the last person to know Elizabeth, see her alive. So this differs from the show because it's not like his first wife had also died at the bottom of a staircase, and it was a friend of the family, and he was the last one to see her alive. He wasn't the one who found her deceased. So just something to know. Before Peterson's trial, the Durham court ordered the exhumation of Ratliff's embalmed body buried in Texas for a second autopsy in April 2003. Arrangements were made for the Durham medical examiner, who had initially performed Kathleen's autopsy, to perform this reevaluation over the objections of the defense counsel, who argued that the autopsy should be performed by Texas medical examiners where the body was being exhumed. The body was then transported from Texas to Durham, and the Durham ME found sufficient evidence to drawn from the result of the second autopsy, along with new witness statements describing the scene, to overturn earlier findings and list Ratliff's cause of death as a homicide.
So the prosecution declined to accuse Peterson of Ratliff's death, but introduced the death into trial as an incident, giving Peterson the idea of how to, quote, fake Kathleen's accident. Despite police reports, there was very little blood at the scene of Ratliff's death. The nanny, who was the first to discover the body in 1985, took the stand at Peterson's trial and testified that there was a large amount of blood at the scene. Another witness testified to spending much of the day cleaning bloodstains off the wall. Doubt as to the admissibility of the Ratliff evidence in court was one of the grounds for the subsequent appeal against the conviction lodged by Peterson's lawyer in 2005. In October of 2002, acting as administrator for Kathleen's estate, Caitlin filed a wrongful death claim against Peterson. In June 2006, Peterson filed for bankruptcy. 2 weeks later, Caitlin filed an objection to the bankruptcy. On February 1st, 2007, Caitlin and Peterson settled the wrongful death claim for $25 million, pending acceptance by the courts involved, and finalized of the settlement of the court was announced on February 1st, 2008.
So on October 10th, 2003, after one of the longest trials in North Carolina history, the Durham County jury found Peterson guilty of the murder of Kathleen Peterson, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Denial of parole requires premeditation. So that means they ruled that this was a premeditated attack. Despite the jury accepting the murder as a spur-of-the-moment crime, they also found it premeditated, which is interesting to note. As one juror explained, premeditated meant not only planning hours or days ahead, but it could also mean planning in the seconds before committing a spur-of-the-moment crime. So Peterson was housed at the Nash Correctional Institute near Rocky Mount until he was released on December 16th, 2011.
I also, of course, had to add in the owl theory, which everybody, I'm sure, knows. So in late 2003, a new theory of Kathleen's death was raised, that she had been attacked by a barred owl outside, had fallen after rushing inside, and had been knocked unconscious after hitting her head on the first tread of the stairs. The owl theory was raised by Durham attorney T. Lawrence Pollard, a neighbor of the Petersons, who was not involved in this case but had been following the public details. He approached the police suggesting an owl might have been responsible after viewing the autopsy photographs of Kathleen's head wounds. Later, when reading the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation evidence list, he found a feather listed as found in Kathleen's hair, despite having previously been informed by the DA's office that no feathers were found during the investigation. So the SBI lab, the crime lab, reported listing a microscopic feather and a wooden sliver from a tree limb entangled in the clump of hair had been pulled out by the roots found clenched in Kathleen's left hand. A re-examination of the hair in September 2008 had found another microscopic feather. According to Pollard, had a jury been presented with this evidence, it would have materially affected their deliberation and therefore would have materially affected their ultimate verdict. Prosecutors have ridiculed the claim, and Deborah Radish, who conducted the autopsy, says it is unlikely that an owl or any other bird could have made those wounds as deep as they were on her scalp. However, Radish's opinion was challenged by other experts in 3 separate affidavits filed in 2010. Despite interest in this theory among some other outside advocates, no motion for a new trial was filed at this point in 2009. On March 2nd, 2017, following the Alford plea, Peterson's attorney...
We're going to get into the Alford plea.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that next. Peterson's attorney filed a motion to allow him to pay for a bird expert at the Smithsonian Institute to examine feather fragments found in Kathleen's hair to determine whether or not she had been attacked by an owl. And in 2023, Pollard endorsed the theory presented in the book, quote, it's called Death by Talons by Tiddy Smith, which posits that a bird attack was not restricted to the outside path, but continued inside and to the Petersons' home.
So after a retrial on December 16th, 2011, Peterson was released from Durham County Jail on a $300,000 bail and placed under house arrest with a tracking anklet. His release on bond followed the judicial order for a new trial after Judge Hudson found that Deaver, which was the blood spatter analyst, had given material misleading and deliberately false testimony about bloodstain evidence and had exaggerated his training, experience, and expertise. We talked about this guy before in episode 4, I believe. It was our first episode where we talked about Dexter, because we were talking about the controversy around blood spatter analysis and how, I believe his first name is Tom Deaver. He was one of the most convincing pieces of testimony in this case and in a lot of other cases. And when it was found out that he had been like exaggerating his training and his expertise and not being totally truthful about evidence and what he was seeing in the evidence, like everything that he ever testified on had to like get a retrial or get tossed. It was bad. Like even if he
I remember talking about this.
Even if he was being truthful in this case, it doesn't matter because he's completely discredited now. Because he lied in other cases. Like, how can you trust that testimony now? So former North Carolina Attorney General Rufus L. Edmiston said that any evidence gathered by Deaver arrived at the scene might be deemed inadmissible in a new trial. And in July 2014, Peterson's bond restrictions were eased. So in October 2014, the court appointed Mike Klinkasum, I'm so sorry, I don't have my glasses on, Klinkasum, to represent Peterson, placing David Rudolph, who had been working pro bono on the case since Peterson's conviction was overturned. Rudolph had stated that he could no longer afford to represent Peterson without being paid. So on November 14th, 2016, Peterson's request for a second trial to be dismissed was refused, and a new trial was scheduled to begin May 8th, 2017. However, a news report on February 7th, 2017 indicated that a resolution had been negotiated by Rudolph, once again representing Peterson, and the Durham County District Attorney. It was an Alford plea. So on February 24th, 2017, Peterson entered an Alford plea to the voluntary manslaughter of Kathleen, asserting his innocence, but agreeing that there was enough evidence that would likely result in a guilty verdict. That is what an Alford plea is. The only reason I know that is from the documentary about this called The Staircase. The judge sentenced him to a maximum of 86 months in prison with credit for time previously served, which he already did. So he had already served more than that. He served 98 and a half months, so he did not face any additional prison time. And this is such a crazy case.
It's
Is the Peterson case. It's, I mean, it's, 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 I really want to go back and watch part 2 of this to see how they resolve or like what conclusion they come to in their fictionalized version of this, and if they also mention Alfred plea, because they're also in a different country, so I don't know their laws.
Yeah, I don't know what British laws are compared to U.S. laws.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, this case is a doozy. I feel terrible for the family and how like the back and forth of it all for years. It's just never getting a true like peace of mind. Like how
2001,
how sensationalized
and it was still going on.
Yeah. And they actually just did a dramatized version of this.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called, but I believe it's on Hulu. Because when I was trying to look up this case to read about it, it kept giving me recommendations to watch it on Hulu.
I think it's also something staircase.
Yeah.
Staircase might be in the title.
Yeah, but it's still just like has everybody's attention. Clearly, there's so many fictionalized versions of it. Yeah.
There's so many books written about it too.
Yeah. Terry, did you know about this case before today?
I asked Dom, I was watching the show and I was like, Dom, this is like exactly like the Peterson case. And he was like, what are you talking about? So I was like explaining it to him and I was like, oh, and they thought there was an owl. And he was like, this is crazy.
It's crazy. It's what we were talking about. So many trained experts in the same field can look at something and see an entirely different picture. So that's why scene investigations are so important, and preserving a crime scene is so important, which they really got into in the Silent Witness episode, is how that threw everything off because it was not secured or preserved, and that can tamper with the evidence and tamper with the story of what happened. Any final thoughts?
I think we should do a part 2 and watch the second part and do another episode.
But I've also really been wanting to watch Rosewood because we haven't talked about Rosewood in a while.
Well, we'll do Rosewood for our next fall, and then we'll come back.
We'll come back to a Silent Witness. After. Yeah, we'll come back to part 2 for Silent Witness. If you guys watch this show and enjoy it, let us know. Let us know.
This show, I didn't realize it had been going on since 1993. It's like one of the longest running British crime dramas.
It's older than you, Jess.
I know.
It's my age, but it's older than you.
It's old.
It's so young.
It's you.
And it looks so good for its age.
In TV years.
It looks so beautiful for its age. As I've been told before by 20-something-year-olds all the time.
Guys,
we're going to get comments now that's like, actually, I thought you were older. Actually, you don't look that great. Sorry. Haters. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Inside the Morgue. If you want to find us on social media, we are at Inside the Morgue Pod on Instagram and TikTok. You can also find us on YouTube at Inside the Morgue, and you can also find us on Young Junk on our YouTube. And yeah, thanks for sitting with us. If you have any show recommendations or anything else that you want us to talk about, like we love deep diving into weird topics in our minisode, which we're gonna get in our next minisode. Is a doozy
next time because we have a crazy one.
We have a crazy one that I had no idea about until Jess told me. So it'll be next week's episode. Yeah, just shoot us a DM. We love chatting with you guys. So leave a comment, whatever. We love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next time for a brand new dissection.
Bye.
Young Junk!